Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. I'm Tom, and I'm invested in the Cosmere. And today I want to talk to you about the unmitigated gall of the Reshi attacking the Alethi in the years leading up to and during the events of the Way of Kings. I'm rereading the Stormlight Archive right now, and one of the small details that I picked up when I was making my way through the Way of Kings was that the Reshi are mentioned attacking the Alethi in many occasions, and this gets all the way up to the point of Dalinar referencing it multiple times when he is talking about returning to Alethkar as a way of unifying the Alethi High Princes. This, in the Way of Kings, doesn't stick out too much because it's really all we hear about the Alethi. There's Dalinar mentioning it. Kaladin brings up the time that one of the people in Hearthstone was injured during, the war with, or the sort of border aggressions with the Reshi. And so we get this picture in our head of what the Reshi people might be like. They're, aggressive people on the borders of Alethkar, raiding and attacking at many, many times throughout the Alethi history. However, when we get to Words of Radiance and we actually meet the Reshi, we get a much different picture of what the Reshi people are like. They're a proud people, sure, bold, but they're a laid-back people. They're an isolationist island people. What business do these do the Reshi have even attacking the Alethi in the first place? And why is Dalinar and Alethkar so worried about these attacks during the Way of Kings? It just doesn't add up. So what I want to do today is take a look at this and come up with a theory as to what's going on here. We'll do this by looking at the conflict from the perspective of the Alethi and then taking a look at it from the perspective of the Reshi. But before we dive into either of those perspectives, we'll do what anybody well invested in the Cosmere will do, and we'll check out the Coppermind and the Arcanum to see if there's anything we can learn. Through the Coppermind, we get just about what we would expect. All of the sort of canon on the page references about Reshi culture, the way in which they go to war with each other, details that we'll talk about when we're looking at things from the Reshi perspective. But nothing that quite gives hard reasons as to why we're seeing what we're seeing out of the Reshi. On the Arcanum, however, we do get a really interesting tidbit. In a 2015 AMA, a Reddit user asked Sanderson, what's the deal? The Reshi Islands don't even touch Alethkar. Why are we hearing about these attacks? And Brandon gives a pretty quick and succinct answer about contested fishing grounds. But this doesn't quite feel like a complete picture to me. And so let's dive into the perspective of the Alethi at this time. At this point in Alethkar's history, Gavilar was recently assassinated, and shortly after, Alethkar gathers up all the High Princes and marches everybody down to the Shattered Plains to start the War of Vengeance. This has some pretty profound effects on the Alethi as a whole. For one, all of the armies of Alethkar have marched down south to the Shattered Plains. You have all your shard bearers, all your experienced officers, your most seasoned troops, and all the support staff that comes alongside that. Engineers, scholars, and the like are all traveling down to fight on this war. This is exaggerated by the fact that this war goes on a lot longer than most people were expecting. 6 years of really, let's be honest, just harvesting gem hearts, making a ton of money, is causing a lot of strain on Alethkar as a whole. We see from Kaladin's perspective that recruitment of Alethi, citizens to become soldiers is on the rise. And so what you have is this effect of taking anybody with any kind of military experience and sending them down to the Shattered Plains for profit. I think this has a profound effect on why you see Dalinar and Alethkar reacting to these attacks so strongly. That it's something that worth of such concern from them. You've got really inexperienced people on your borders. Your best officers are down on the Shattered Plains, and the bulk of the army that would normally support any extra aggression on the behalf of other nations, you would send maybe a shard bearer or two to kind of tip the scales. This is the power of the Alethi being wielded. You have these now inexperienced people on your borders, soldiers who are very green, not very talented at fighting yet, and you have officers who don't really know how to handle this extra pressure. You also have these people knowing for a fact that there is no support for them, that there's no shard bearer or experienced army just a couple of miles away, ready to kind of back them up if things get too crazy. The whole army, everybody who means anything, including the king himself, who needs to react to these things and provide the support, the High Prince, everybody is down fighting on the Shattered Plains and focused on that effort. So I think you've got inexperienced officers who are shouting, hey, we're under attack here. Things are ramping up. We're getting attacked. We're getting slaughtered. We need help. We need assistance. And it's really this inexperience that raises that general alarm. But from the king and from Dalinar's perspective, you're also very far away. You can't go in and fix these problems. So I think this is why we hear about these attacks so much. It's a combination of not being near enough to those borders to be able to see the situation and react to the situation. But it's also the inexperience of the soldiers who are defending these areas that really raises this alarm. But as soon as you start to think and picture it's the Reshi who are the ones who are attacking this way, not the Vaedans, not the Herdasians, we know those conflicts are still happening, but it isn't mentioned as frequently as the Reshi are. Why them? Why are they doing this? What did the Reshi get out of this? Sure, there's the fishing grounds, but I think if you start to peel back the layers of who the Reshi are and what their culture is, there's actually some more interesting answers. What we learn about the Reshi is that as a people who want to be on the global stage of Roshar, they perceive that they aren't very well respected. We hear Talik talk to Rissyn about how everybody underestimates the Reshi. They think that they're just these island people, floating around on these islands, having a blast, and are uncivilized, uncultured, maybe even borderline barbaric. And the effect that this has in things probably like trade negotiations, border disputes, probably, pretty profoundly affects the Reshi people. And so, what are the Reshi to do? They have needs as an island. There are things that they can't get. Modern medicines, wood, we hear these things referenced in the trade negotiations between Rissyn and Talik. But there's probably a lot of supplies that they look to import. And so how do you get a leg up if you're the Reshi? Well, they have a huge advantage. And that is you have people from all over Roshar coming to the Reshi Islands to look for the lifestyle that they provide. And what that provides to the Reshi people, one, is some diversity. They get the opportunity. They're isolated island nations. So you have to sort of bring new people into the island to help the population grow. But you're also getting a first hand into those people and their culture and the way that those nations think and what's going on in those nations. Things that aren't reciprocated for the Reshi. The Alethi barely know anything about the Reshi people. Maybe some of the High Princes, maybe the King. They've probably got some better idea of what the culture is like, scholars and the like. But in general, the Reshi kind of have this reputation. The Reshi, though, perfectly understand the Alethi. I think they've realized that the key to getting beneficial trade and, respective borders through the Alethi is through the sword. They have to do their equivalent of shouting from island to island, boasting and taunting each other through the Alethi, which takes the form of raiding. The Alethi really don't have much reason to trade with the Reshi. They technically don't border each other. You've got the Vadans and the Herdasians in between you and the Reshi, making any kind of trade expedition potentially dangerous. And as the Alethi, you have your borders to the south, where you've got access to the Asius Empire. You've got access to Thalena, which gives you access to the world. There's not a lot of reason to interact with the Reshi, and yet the Reshi have this need. And so there's an imbalance there. And the way that the Reshi overcome this is by attacking Alethkar, by showing that they are not just some people to be ignored, but that they're a powerful neighbor who can threaten them. And what better time to attack the northern border of a powerful nation when everybody in the south is where you've sent all of your armies, all the shard bearers, all the most experienced soldiers. Everybody is in the south, and the north is relatively undefended. So my theory is that the Reshi are attacking in such an aggressive way so that they can get better trade negotiations out of the Alethi. They're speaking in their language through aggression and through attacking, and they're trying to show the Alethi people that they aren't anybody to be trifled with. And I think if you're Alethkar and you've got this, sort of border incursions to the north, the idea that you would send your shard bearers away, or that you would send out a detachment of your army to go and deal with this problem, considering you're fighting a war to the south, is absurd. You wouldn't do it. But if you could solve that problem with a really favorable trade negotiation, that's easy. And the stuff the Reshi want really isn't all that meaningful anyway to you as a nation that can supply all these things yourself. It's a very easy win-win, and it is just such a perfect manipulation of the Reshi to the Alethi. These small details are what makes Brandon's world building so incredible. As far as I know, we don't really hear about this conflict past the Way of Kings. I think the next time we have a meaningful interaction between the Reshi and the Alethi is during Dawnshard, I think. I'm going to be paying attention to it this reread to see if I pick out any more hints about this particular conflict as I go through. But we can sit here and fully realize, using what we know about the two different cultures at play here and minor details peppered in throughout an entire book, we can establish this entire, sort of history in our minds about what's actually going on. And it fits. This is a perfectly reasonable, at least I think, perfectly reasonable explanation as to why this is going down. And it just all fits so nicely. But what do you think? Do you think that I'm far off? Is there something that I'm missing? Leave that in the comments below. And if you like these kinds of videos, or you're really into the Cosmere RPG, subscribe to the channel. I make videos whenever I feel like it. I also have invested in thecosmere.com, where I write about these things. I have a lot of really cool guides and resources for the Cosmere RPG, if you're into that as well. And so check all of that out. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.